So Tuan asked me to talk about data for peace, of course, and I have a few thoughts about that, including some things which I think are should provoke some discussion. So I was part of what the Secretary General at that time called the data revolutionaries when the Sustainable Development Goals were put together, because a lot of what I study is how we can understand human societies better using data and therefore craft policies that really work. And a lot of the focus that we have is in taking the 2 century old idea of census data and augmenting it to have richer census data. So the census data is something that it's hard to appreciate, but any sort of modern management of society, government, services depends on knowing where the people are and something about them, and not at the individual level, but at the neighborhood level. But in addition to the physical distribution of people, to be able to really understand society, you need to have a little bit more. You need to know things like where do people work, where do they play. You need to know the connections between people. Again, not at the individual level, but you need to know where there are ghettos and where people are segregated and where they're not. And if you can know those simple things, then you can do amazing things. And this is part of the mission for the uh, UN's Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which I'm on the board of directors of. And what we've shown is that just with this sort of somewhat richer data about community connections, you can identify poverty very quickly, very accurately. You can improve transportation. You can improve public health. COVID was a great example, although a terrible example, of how very simple sorts of data could improve health outcomes rather dramatically. And altogether, what it allowed people to do is to begin thinking about being able to optimize infrastructure and investment in a way that helped people's lives very deeply. So that's the data and accountability aspect of the Sustainable Development Goals. But today is about peace. And what does data have to do with peace? And the observation is that war often starts from mutual suspicion. One group doesn't interact with another group, and they begin suspecting that the other group is cheating or doing nefarious things. And many politicians use this type of suspicion to rally the troops. Indeed, they fan it. And we see this today in Ukraine and Russia. But it's a story that's as old as mankind, uh, using ignorance of the other side in order to fan the passions that eventually lead to war. And what I would propose is that just as in the Sustainable Development Goals, one can use data to begin to better know the situation and better find solutions. But the same type of thing is possible about peace and suspicion and that whole process of mutual armament. And in fact, this is the psychological part of the Nuclear Strategic Arms Treaty, which has kept nuclear arms at bay for the last 70 years. So the question then, of course, is does this work more generally? When you talk about, for instance, the Strategic Arms Treaty or any of the other sort of treaty, they have verification elements. But these are seem very technical and very concrete. Um, and war starts from social processes, from populations becoming very suspicious about each other. And I want to show an experiment that we did uh, that that I think directly addresses this. So we did an experiment with some 5,000 people, demographically balanced across the U.S. And I should mention this was recently independently verified by Stanford in an experiment of sampling 30,000 people across the US. And what we found was that this notion of mutual suspicion is indeed something that is driving uh, the uh, the urge for unconventional, unethical behavior. So in the United States, um, most people on the left, that's this top graph, believe that the people on the right are more extreme, more interested in subverting democracy. They're really engaged in a culture war. Um, but the truth is very different. If you actually go and you sample in a scientific way what people on the left believe, very few of them are, sorry, people on the right believe, very few of them are as radical as they're painted. In fact, most are quite moderate and willing to support uh, engagement. And the same is true about the right belief about the left's opinions. The right believes that the left is full of crazies. But the truth is if you actually go and you ask people one-on-one for their actual opinions, they're very much more moderate. And so it's this lack of knowledge of the other side that is driving this notion that the other guys are cheating and we need to take radical action in order to be able to protect ourselves. And I put peace and war up here, and in the United States, it's not that extreme yet, but it's perhaps closer than we would like to believe. But this is a general psychological process. When people don't interact broadly, they develop suspicions of each other. And what we found is that just showing people what we showed you just now, in other words, this notion of what the real beliefs are of the other people, has a dramatic change on people's beliefs and their ability, their willingness to subvert democracy, their willingness to promote radical effects. In fact, it's something where perhaps the extreme beliefs, the warlike attitude of each group can be decreased by something on the order of 50%, just by having trusted third-party data. And this is the sort of thing that I think that the UN in particular could be very good at, is what are the actual beliefs of the people in each of these countries? Are they actually trying to subvert the peace, or are they not? Now, this may not apply very much to the situation like the Ukraine uh, Russian war, because that seems to be something that comes generally from a small coterie of people at the top. But if the Russian people had been much more aware of what was happening or had much more access to true opinions about the Ukrainians, it would have been much more difficult for the people at the top to fan the flames of war. So just as data is critical in understanding how we can address poverty and inequality and the other sorts of problems that we have, this sort of data about people's attitudes, about people's beliefs, is something that has the potential, the demonstrated potential, to really damp down the winds of war before they really get started. So I'm just going to stop there with that provocation, as they say, and hopefully that will promote some interesting discussion and some interesting thoughts.